that ability to be a high performer takes more than one skill set. It's not just your clinical skill set, it's that ability to get outcomes for patients, but it's that ability, professional skills, how you get the person to turn up. You can write the best treatment plan for a patient. Sarah Higgins, we're here, episode 1 of the Allied Health Warrior. How excited are we?
Very excited. Hello, how are you?
I'm very good. New studio here at our Moorebank podcast studio, brand new. Just an amazing opportunity for us. So we're starting the Allied Health Warrior podcast. What does this mean to you? Why are you so excited about it?
For me, it's the opportunity to be a part of a platform that brings in industry experts that we can learn from and educate the wider community. I feel like it will up the standards of professional practices.
Brilliant. I guess for me, we want to definitely talk about industry topics and also want to challenge the industry in a certain way. Giving practitioners, it's very much a podcast that we're designed for the practitioner and for the people working in it. It's not a consumer podcast, but a neutral platform to really, be heard, and have that ability to tell the story of what about the industry and what is happening. I think there's a personal thing for me as well about really creating a bit of a brand. I've been in the industry for 25 years, and one day I want to have a platform that we can have a bit of impact into policy and be invited to the seat at the table. At the moment, feel like we're so on the outer, and the people making policy aren't doing a great job. So I think the podcast is a platform to get that message across. So anything else you want to add?
Amazing. No, that's wonderful.
All right. So episode 1. I'm going to start by introducing each of ourselves. So my name's Mark Seymour. I own a large allied health business with over 150 staff. We are a true interdisciplinary practice. I've been 20 years in January of owning Optimum Health Solutions. I started out as an exercise physiologist myself, and now run a really large interdisciplinary multi-clinic health business. And with that experience is why I'm really excited to be bringing this podcast. And I want to introduce my co-host to the Allied Health Warrior podcast, Sarah Higgins. Sarah obviously started her career in the UK, where she climbed the ranks of the NHA. She's an OT by trade herself. What do I call it? The NHA, NHS. Sorry, she started climbing in the NHS system. She spent a lot of time, firstly in Australia, working in the AT, being an industry expert in equipment prescription as an OT. She's come back into a very clinical based role where she was the manager of a clinic, an MDT clinic. And now she's the national head of clinical development for an OT department, and really providing that expertise. And so with that, I have an amazing co-host I'm really, really excited for.
What an introduction. My gosh. No, that's great. I'm really excited to be a part of this. And I think both of us can bring our own expertise to the table and learn from each other and express.
I want to introduce today's topic, and I'll introduce it with a bit of a statement. And in the realm of healthcare, the journey from novice to expert, the journey from novice to expert is fraught with challenges, triumphs, opportunities for growth, and a whole lot of anxiety. And we'll talk about this a little bit later. But central to the journey is the role of coaching and mentorship. This coaching and mentorship has the real potential to shape the future leaders and really set themselves up to be an independent practitioner who can solve complex problems for their patients. However, it's really clear that young practitioners have a real thirst for knowledge and desire. They really desire guidance and help through mentorship, but many young health practitioners today seem hesitant to fully embrace this coaching and mentorship. Instead, they gravitate towards the familiar comfort of being told what to do, seeking validation and avoiding critique. So today, I want to dissect what lies at the root of this reluctance to really be coached and mentored, and how opening up to coaching, mentorship can pave the way for transformation, growth, and leadership. What's your take, on this?
Yeah, I'm very much excited to fully embrace to dissect this topic. And I think I'm already kind of embracing it in my role as National Head of Clinical Development for Occupational Therapy. For me, I believe that dissecting this topic, it will educate me how to be the best version of myself, to lead and coach the occupational therapist within the company that I work for, but also the wider occupational therapy team within the country. Also, to identify obstacles within the industry that may be hindering the process and job satisfaction for young practitioners with the aim of reducing those burdens. But really, where has this topic come from? I think it's threefold. I think I can see how much you, Mark, have fully embraced the coaching. You've put a lot of time, investment, money into being coached, and you share that coaching experience with your wider team, which is really amazing.
Yeah, and my obviously coaching has moved more into the business side of things, but really very healthcare focused. I mean, there was you know, 15 years of investing.
Have you always believed that?
I mean, definitely, probably. I think from back when I was you know, aspiring elite athlete and things like the need from having a coach and being, and we'll talk about what being coached means, but it really means really being critiqued, and we'll dissect it a little bit further. But yeah, I do, but it's right through being a practitioner and then starting a business. It's the need to have a coach, and over the years I've had a number of coaches and sort of progressed as my company's grown and my knowledge has grown and higher level of mentor as such. But yeah, very much believe in it.
Yeah, amazing. I think other reasons why this topic came up was recently you actually shared this podcast with Dr. Atul Gawande. Sorry if I've completely butchered that, but the title was called "Want to Get Great at Something? You Should Get a Coach." That was really inspiring. It was such a great thing. It completely changed my perception on coaching, and I think it did to a lot of people.
We'll put a link in the to this podcast, but tell us a little bit about Dr. Atul and what that podcast was.
He was an orthopedic surgeon.
Really at the height of his expertise, coach, and what was so inspiring about that for you?
The most inspiring part about it is I think there's a perception that you become the best in your field, that you are not coachable. But I think what Dr. Atul Gawande demonstrated was it doesn't matter how long you've been in the industry, it doesn't matter how much knowledge you have, you're always coachable, and there's always going to be someone out there who can enable you to understand some deficits in your approach to be the best version of yourself.
Yeah, I think it's the ability to be critiqued and have a look at where your improvements can be.
And also, thirdly, the hours that we spend discussing this topic and staff individually, as well as just talking about the industry struggles in this area, I think it's a societal problem that I think you would agree on as well.
Yeah, definitely. I'm looking forward to dissect it. Well said, Sarah. It's brilliant. I think for us to get into the topic, one of our very first things that we need to do is really break down what the difference between, coach, mentor, teacher, leader is. And so I'm going to ask you, what do you think being coached means, or what does coaching mean?
So coaching involves being critiqued, right? So it's being critiqued with the aim of improving you personally or improving a team and outcome.
You sort of see that in sport, don't you? Like it's, a weakness, letting goals in, letting tries in on the left side. That's a weakness. We need to fix it. And so I think that's really, really the essence of coaching, being critiqued to improve performance. Yeah, brilliant. How's that different to being managed?
Being managed is more so ensuring that you're meeting organizational systems, procedures, and being held accountable to your roles.
Yeah.
It's very completely different being managed and coached.
So what is being taught, or being a teacher, or what does that involve, to being a teacher?
Teaching is imparting knowledge and expertise within specific areas to be able to facilitate the learning and skill development for individuals.
Yeah, definitely. Really about that education component. How would you describe mentoring?
Well, that goes way beyond teaching. So that's more so of a guide of long set plans, fostering personal and professional growth. It's more so to peel back the layers to be able to problem solve independently and empower independent problem solvers.
Yeah. Really go delve deeper and challenge the person, isn't it?
Exactly.
It's quite often the opposite of teaching, in that you're actually empowering them to find the solution rather than educating them on.
Just given the answers. That's right.
Another real definition is that cheerleader. How would you define a cheerleader?
Providing support and positive affirmation. So boosting morale, boosting confidence, really the complete opposite of coaching, really not providing those critiques.
Now, I think you can be a cheerleader and a coach at the same time at the right times, and we'll go into that. But yeah, so that providing that support, isn't it? And I guess the last one, it's like leadership. Being a leader. What's sort of the definition? That's a word that's used all the time, but what does a leader mean?
So the ability to influence others towards a common goal. They're usually inspiring, guiding, and people just want to follow them. That's more so a leader.
Now, I think that's the two key things are influence and turning around that you've got followers.
Agreed.
And I really feel that we can title all the other five things, but the leadership is something you can't give a title to. It's something that you've got to really earn. And the only way you earn it is if you've got people following you. And so that's really great. And I really love those definitions, through the thing. But so what do we think that young practitioners crave out of that? We'll take leadership out of the thing, but the previous five were coaching, managing, teaching, cheerleading, and mentorship. And you hear it all the time. We both do interviews for our role, and we hear, I want a mentor. Okay, I want, they're told coming out of university how much they need a mentor. But I personally believe, and I think from our wealth of conversations that we've had about this, it's obviously something that we're really passionate about and we talk all the time, is the real lack of understanding of what a mentor is and their real desire not to be. The one thing I know is young practitioners really crave education. They really crave that teacher to teach them. Okay. There's no question about that. They want to be taught what the right clinical practice is, what the X outcome is, or the X result is to get Y outcome. Like what to do X to get Y. Is probably the best way to say it. They really crave that teacher, and I think the industry provides that. Okay, some companies do it a lot better than others, but the teaching is something they really crave. It's really funny but I think we talked about it the other day about the real craving for a management. Okay. If you ask a young practitioner and say, I'm going to micromanage you, they would freak out. But in the end, they talk about how, they want more support. I don't get enough support. But in the end, what they're saying is they want to actually be managed. Okay. It's like, because when you break it down, it's like they want to be told what to do now, make sure that they are held accountable to their tasks that they're being given, be checked off once they've completed it, and they really crave that cheerleader, that person who says, yeah, you've done a great job. But in the end, and then what is my next task? And so we really find that they want the education, they actually want to be managed, and they want that cheerleader of support. And when you break down, that's what they consider at the moment. They're considering mentorship. And we talk about this all the time, but how young practitioners really don't want to be coached. They got that real anxiety and fear about being critiqued. And they really struggle with being mentored, where they have to come up with where that person promotes and delves deeper and peels back the layer to get them to being independent. And I think, there's obviously exceptions to that, but that's across the industry. And it doesn't matter whether you're an OT or whether you're in the physio space. It's a I think you mentioned before, it's a societal issue of, maybe expand, what's your saying on, those points before we go in and critique and find out really why why we think that is. But
I completely agree with you in regards to the micromanagement. I do feel a lot of people, especially, going into a new job for anybody, but going from university to being a practitioner for the first time is so daunting, so scary. And I think a lot of people, this could be their first full-time position as well. So they don't really know what to expect. So that micromanagement and guidance is a key tool to have. I think maybe the micromanagement terminology is the issue here, and maybe we need to change the terminology. But it's definitely something that I see, not even just in the role that I'm in now, in previous workplaces that I've worked in, or even as a peer in workplaces back in the day, or being vulnerable. I think maybe I was probably the same when I first came into the industry, but I think lots has changed
Yeah.
in the past 10 years.
Where's an example where you've just seen the desire? Yeah, maybe can you think of a, previous staff member, like this desire to want to be managed, yet I see it all the time where they say, no, I don't want to be managed. I want to be independent. But then their actions are the complete opposite.
It's usually with just like the daily run-ins and the organization of their diaries or managing their work caseload, their commitments, even their communication styles with people. It's usually a lot of the soft skills, not necessarily the clinical input at this point.
How would you summarize that? Like I gave the example of practitioners in the industry. They want to be managed. They want to be, they're craving for learning, so they want to be taught. They definitely want to have that cheerleader telling them how well they've done. Okay. Why do you think there's still this struggle with, being coached and being mentored?
I think it's fear of being critiqued. I think it's a fear of identifying errors, like seeing critique as a negative approach as opposed to a power tool to their development. I think that's probably the biggest drawback at the moment.
We've got a mutual friend, and we heard him speak recently, Lee Hunter, and he works. He's been CEO of TikTok Australia, and so very much worked in this millennial generation. And he talks about he talked to us at a course that we went to recently about young practitioners being anxious. Do you think that plays a role in their fear of being critiqued and being told where their weaknesses are?
I do, and I think it could be twofold here. I think any new practitioner is generally anxious, but the Gen Z plus new practitioner, it's a combination of multiple types of anxiety. We're a anxious generation as it is, so combining that with natural work anxieties is...
Why do you think we're an anxious, society at the moment?
Could be social media, more social pressures, more
cost of living, maybe, that feeling like, or how am I going to buy a house? It's like, those things I think all play a part into it. So then they get into a role where they turn up for work and they get in a role and they actually have been told how great they've been. They've obviously you got to be very academically smart to get into these courses. And then next thing you know, they're really struggling. And it's quite often not even the clinical stuff. It's even the basics of how to do the job, not even clinical judgments on patient, but just the workload that causes them to be, oh, hang on a second, that realization for the first time in their life, they don't have it all together.
Agree. And I think that the hardest part on that, linking back to social media, is you now know what everyone else is doing. So you can see Bob got a promotion, someone else is working in an area that they love, and maybe you're not quite at that area, at that point in your life yet, but you have that social pressure to go up the ladder very quickly.
Yeah, I think there's another thing about the different people. Healthcare in Australia now has a lot of people from different cultures. And I see it very much in there's some cultural pressure around not showing weakness in some different cultures. Where asking for help is seen as a sign of weakness. And so I see it. We're a very multicultural profession. We're a very multicultural country. And so I think that also plays a role. Have you seen that at all in your term?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think where I work and where I've worked in many areas, especially in Australia, I think Australia is very good at empowering people to speak up and really encourages you to identify struggles that you're having. But I think as well, coming from England, that's probably not something that I was as used to either. You just work and you get caught under. I've definitely experienced it in my current job and where I've worked previously. I also think from a personal aspect, I've also experienced a cultural shift. You know, Australia and England may seem quite similar, but work approaches and asking for help can still be seen, can still be deemed as a weakness in England. So it was a transition for me. So I can completely understand people that come from other countries.
Subcontinent, we see it in some of the,
100%.
some of the Asian countries. It's like, they've battled to get here, and then they, trying to really prove themselves that they don't want to be, and being critiqued is sort of being critiqued or told where their weaknesses is sort of seen in their eyes as, this is I'm being put down where I'm trying to put my best foot forward. And I see it all the time. I see it in interviews, particularly where you ask a question like, what is an area of growth and improvement? And they will just refuse to answer it and say, I can do this, I can do that. It's like refusing to admit where they're going to need help.
I think you hit the nail on the head there that I think you work so hard to get your registration here in Australia, and you've got to jump through quite a few hoops to get your registration here in Australia, that you constantly want to prove yourself. And I think that could come into the transition into occupational therapy, even probably more so in other disciplines. I'm just linking it to occupational therapy at this point, but I know other disciplines, you've got to jump through a lot more hoops and try and prove yourself a lot more that you're, I suppose, worthy to work here in Australia.
Yeah. But it's still the same as, people who've graduated, got their bit of paper, graduated in Australia. There's still a parallel to that of just young practitioners.
Agreed. Mark, why do you think practitioners seek the guidance and are so fearful of critique?
Yeah, I think it comes down to there's very much a culture. We're now in a workforce where very under 30. Okay, so especially if you're working, not that all allied health professions in the disability space, but with the large increase in NDIS jobs, aged care jobs, there's been this huge amount of influx of allied health professionals in the workforce. In universities are graduating more, so with that comes a very young Gen Z, Gen Y, Gen Z culture, and I think. I generally think that there's grown up in an era of constant praise and validation. They're accustomed to be told how well they're done. Mentioned before how well, how smart you've actually got to be to get into these courses. I think OT. I think we talked about before. Like 93 is the current mark, and I think it was higher because previously, and it's so they crave that. They've been told how well they've done. They're not the people who have needed to be critiqued dramatically through their academic space, but they crave that affirmation in the workplace, and I think they lean to those cheerleaders, and when they're not getting that, they then gravitate to the complainers as well. Like, so with the opposite of a cheerleader is the person who is, they look for that something's not right, and that negative connotation. So in the end, that constant affirmation can breed complacency, and they're not willing to go to that next level. I think there's a real stepping stone in terms of getting from novice to competent. And I feel that when the practitioner gets to that point where in their mind they have this element of, okay, I'm capable of doing the job now, there's this element of, big deep breath. Okay. And very few people then go and seek, and it's all of a sudden they think they're an expert. Competence is completely different to being an expert. And so it takes, it takes that practitioner, that desire to really seek out what true mentorship is and break it down and really aim to be critiqued so that we can go to the next level. And I think, I know in your role that's everything what your role is about as head of clinical development.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I feel as a millennial or a Gen Y, I mean, I'm 31 now, so I think sometimes maybe I lean more to maybe a Gen X, a Gen X.
Don't rub it in.
Sorry,
Don't rub it in. I'm in my 40s, so it's very much in that Gen X space. But yeah.
I feel like I'm mid between the two. So sometimes I can completely empathize with the Gen Zs, and I fully understand the Gen Z's views and approaches and understand their struggles. But I also like to think that I impart some of the wisdom that the Gen X's also have.
Yeah, and I think your endeavor to be a coach is how do you and mentor is to get them from this to being outcome, because performance is a real role. Like, that ability to be a high performer takes more than one skill set. It's not just your clinical skill sets, that ability to get outcomes for patients, but it's that ability, professional skills, how you get the person to turn up. You can write the best treatment plan for a patient, but they don't adhere to it and nothing happens. But it's also that ability to turn up at work and be valuable to an employer, because we now work in a billable hour philosophy in private practice, a little bit different maybe in the hospital setting or things like that. But it's that ability to be able to get outcomes for as many people, and that they really struggle, really struggle with that concept because, I know your job is to provide that coaching and get that person from that anxious state of not, that gap, the skills gap shortage from graduating to being, valuable in their role.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really passionate about that area. I'm really passionate about um, coaching, empowering, being a mixture of the coach, cheerleader, mentor, manager, all of those things, just to enable them to be the best practitioner they can possibly be to get the best outcomes. And then that's going to be beneficial for the industry, beneficial for companies, um, and just our general approach for the
I
community.
think in the end, that's how they're going to get paid more too,
Yeah.
because this mentality of, just I've time served, I've been in the role for this long, but in the end, it's becoming that performer. And I think that's where coaching really things, because in the end, it's performance.
Mm.
What do we define it? Critiques are to improve your performance. Clinical outcomes for our patients are absolutely important, but that ability to get that for more patients, and you know, we work in a billable hours model now for the majority of healthcare, and it's really, really important.
And to be able to do it comfortably, confidently, competently.
Yeah, and be able to walk away at the end of the day and leave it all at work. Because how many practitioners take the troubles at work home?
Agreed.
I'm a firm believer that we need to separate that.
Yeah.
Walk out the door and forget about it. A little bit different as a business owner, but as a practitioner, that is absolutely the core goal. We do it, and we're showing value in what we do. I think, as we move forward, the embracing growth and leadership is really imperative on being coached and mentored. In the end, it comes down to personal growth. And it's something that I am going through a new phase of growth in mine. Like, I can, over the 47 years of age, graduated at 20 from university, 27 years been in the industry, and I go through waves of growth and really developing myself. And I know right now I'm going through a whole new level of surrounding myself with people that are further on in the journey than me, and critiquing me and challenging me and peeling back the layer. And for me, that's what's going to enable me to get to my full potential, and make a difference to the industry. Where I think that getting that mentality into practitioners who is really important. I think in the end, we've talked about coaching and mentorship, but in the end, we want to lead the next generation. We want to cultivate that next generation of healthcare leaders, and it's only through coaching and mentoring that we're going to actually make change. That in the end, people are going to respect us more. And I think what we want to turn around is to turn around and have people following. And that's my goal for my company, is to be a bit of a beacon to an industry that people go and they want to follow us. And that means we're really being industry leaders. And hopefully this podcast that me and you're doing also shows and makes them that, because I think growth and coaching, final bit, is long-term success. While being managed, being taught, having cheerleader offers that temporary satisfaction and comfort, and that it's temporary. Really being coached, being mentored is the real foundation, I believe, for long-term success. And by investing into your own personal development and really striving to be lead people too, it's really important. And I think they're the three real things that it will help us embrace growth. What's your take on, not only receiving coaching but giving coaching?
I think it's a skill within itself, isn't it? I think not everyone's trained to be a coach, and I think it's a skill that every leader, every manager, every mentor, anyone who supports a team and empowers a team needs to upskill to be a coach. What would you say are the main characteristics of being a coach?
I think, the question about what characteristics, it has to be the ability to identify areas of improvement. There's no point in being a coach if there's nothing to improve. So you've got to be able to identify those areas of improvement first. Now, being a coach might have to have an education component and taught, and you may not have those skills. So bringing in another person who can, like in a clinical skill set, as coming from a rehab background, exercise physiology is my discipline. If I'm, in my business have someone who's an OT, I can't clinically train them up. So I'm going to need to bring in that educator and that teacher to teach that skill set. Also that ability in some of the professional skills. It might be sales technique. It might even just be the ability to sell the treatment plan so that people want to keep coming back, so they adhere to the program and the treatment plan that you're putting in place. But it's identifying those things first is the key to do it, and then creating a system and structure. Sometimes you've got to create systems and procedures within your organization. Sometimes you've got to manage that person. This is a weakness. You're not doing it. Now let's show you, and I'm going to hold you accountable to it. Because by repetition, you then improve, and it becomes a new habit, or it becomes a new skill set that you learn. I don't think we can pin it all on a generational thing, though. I think we went down that rabbit hole a little bit too much there. I think there's some underlying problems within the industry.
What do you think they are? What do you think are the underlying problems?
Well, I think inherently we've got the industry is younger than ever. Okay, I mean, you only got to go back 8 years ago, and if you're a speech pathologist, you would never get a full-time job out of university. There was no full-time jobs. The dream was to get into the hospital system because you had security. There was early developmental private practices, but NDIS has created all these jobs, and therefore universities are producing more people and stuff. So it's a younger profession than ever. Okay, obviously OT speech is also very female dominated, but even physios now 60% female and 40% male. Like, healthcare is attracting that, and that's not a spite on females. It's just I think the industry also previous to the NDIS had motherhood, and people would move out of the industry once motherhood. So what it's actually made. It's made it a younger profession. I see more and more companies giving juniors senior titles, because they've needed to, because they're the most senior within the organization. The truth is it takes 6 to 12 years to be an expert in the field. And I see, plenty of people that desire to have that title. Okay. It's like put on their social media, put on their LinkedIn, and they're striving for it earlier rather than striving for growth and learning and being coached. But as early as 18 months, they've been given sort of senior titles, and I think it's an absurd thing really in the industry.
Do you think the companies that are bringing them up into these titles, do you think they're supporting them, whether it's clinically, professionally?
I think the companies that are giving them these titles have no other choice, because they can't attract the more senior people to do it, so they're making best do with what resources they have. But then that creates this problem within the industry that other people then expected as well. And I think I just got to come back to the thing. It's like a minimum of 6 years for you to be. Now, you get to a point of competency somewhere around between 12, 18, 2 years, where you feel like, oh, okay, I got this. But an element of competency isn't senior and expertise. And I think so that's a real industry problem, just because so many young practitioners. How do you go from needing coaching, mentorship, management one week to the next week, okay, I feel comfortable in actually being that? I strongly encourage, because there's a difference between peer-to-peer learning and structured, titled senior to junior. I think that's another point is I see this increased community only model there where it creates this silo mentality of practitioners working more and more independently, because the absolute first part of being, leadership and coaching happens at a peer-to-peer level. That ability for you to, I'm learning this, so I'm going to teach the person to my left, and this financial model of community only versus being all in the one clinic, and both within your discipline having, or talking OTs in your case, but it doesn't matter whether you're a podiatrist, but having that person you can learn from, and then imparting what your wisdom of what you're learning. I'm learning this at the moment, and that's where coaching and mentorship starts, I believe. Uh, but now there's this, if I'm not getting it from a titled position, then I'm not actually receiving it. And I think that's a huge problem the industry's created, and it's because of the younger workforce. And I think there's a lot of companies out there that aren't investing into their developing the professional skills and the clinical skills. Some teach clinical, but there's plenty of companies out there that don't even have some sort of clinical program, development program. But they certainly don't teach. They certainly don't teach them to be a coach or a mentor. And I know in my company, it's a new level that we're trying of the people who've been given titles as like less. We'll still obviously upskill them clinically, but teaching coach and mentor. And I guess this is where a lot of this conversation has been had for the last 6 months within our company, and why I'm now, I guess, wanting to talk about it in episode 1. What would you say to practitioners, people in the industry out there about being coached or mentored? How would you, and how would you go about finding a good coach?
I think first you need to be open to being coached. Like we were just discussing, it's really difficult to be critiqued and take on that feedback and apply it appropriately. I think being really good at self-reflections, identifying your weaknesses to see in what areas do you need a coach. I think it's looking internally at your companies, doing great research on the company that you're going to go to see whether they provide internal coaching, or just if they don't, that's okay. You just need to be prepared to seek external coaching. It all comes down into the research. It all comes down to those 3 areas, I think. What do you think?
I agree, being open, but also knowing what you're identifying your weaknesses and where you need to be. No point going to something at the moment, obviously upskilling my coach is very much about business. He tells me where I'm doing wrong, where my mistakes are. Like it's not a pat on the back relationship. It's, tell me what you've done, or where the problem is, what have you done? And he tells me what whether I've done this right or wrong. It's got to be, an environment where you're open to be receptive, but having the right person is really, really important. If you're passionate I'll talk in the OT space, but if you're passionate for AT, and the assessment base, being an assessment-based OT, no point having a coach who specializes in, pediatric therapy. I think understanding those things, and I think, this is where some of the larger companies that do this well have it internally and can go to different parts of the organization. There is this real craving to have this, we talked about it before, they want to be managed and they want that support, and there's this desire to have it sitting beside you. Okay, but if you want to go to be critiqued and get that expertise from someone senior, we got to maybe look, and bigger organizations tend to have that. But there is obviously great independent practitioners that also offer it, may have stepped out on their own and are offering those services. But you got to know what their strengths are, and really seek and it comes out of knowing what you're wanting to get out of it.
Do you think, so based on what you've just said, we've spoken before about communication styles and learning styles. Do you think, say, for example, I work in assistive technology and I want an assistive technology coach. I found someone who's an expert in the area, but our communication styles aren't quite the same. Our learning approaches aren't quite the same. Do you think you will blend with every coach?
I don't think you blend with every person, but I think it ends up coming down to you. Uh, a lot of people who are experts will be good teachers, but they won't be good coach because they won't break it down. But if you're open to learn, even if you clash in a certain scenario, there's still something you can get out of that person, and that might actually be what you want to hear. And you're craving to be taught, or you're craving education around your areas of clinical knowledge, but in the end, sometimes it's got to be some of those other skill sets. And there's a lot of people in senior positions that don't coach, they don't critique, they just impart the knowledge they know. And it's like transfer of knowledge from here to here, and expect you to be able to do it. But are they pulling back the layer, challenging you to think independently, allow you to go down a rabbit hole, and then bring it back with, okay, now this is the suggestion I would make. You've gone and you've given me 3 possible treatment plans that could happen. What are the positives and negatives? Okay. You've raised the positive. Now, based on your positive, which one do you think is the right decision? Well, let's eliminate number 3. That one, the negatives far outweigh number 3. But the 1 and 2 could really work. What decision are you going to make? I'm happy. You make a decision and I'm happy with that decision. This is the reason why. Now, when would you not? When would you have to discard that and go back and make the change to option 1? Well, it'd be at this point. And in the end, the mentor has there. Or if they've gone down a rabbit hole and it's like completely wrong, okay, now I'm going to step in, and this is why the weaknesses are. This is why you've made a mistake here. The reason is for this reason. I think option number 2 is the clear thing. And I think that balance between, a lot of people who put themselves into teaching positions won't critique, they'll just move in it. But you've got to be open. I think out of challenge and being confronted is where you actually learn the most. That's a personal belief. You learn the most. I learn the most in business out of the challenges. And you take myself to the next. Now, you wish COVID never happened, but what learned and the problems that arose of financial problems in COVID, and lack of low productivity levels and work ethics that people created in there. Did I learn a huge amount out of it? And of course I did. And that will make me a better business person later. But that same thing is in here. Sometimes out of the challenges that the coach brings, you may not like it. But I think that's how we've got to go into the relationship, that.
I agree. And I think a lot of the feedback that I get, not just from myself, but other leaders within the industry, is when you do try and coach, it's received personally, and it's never a personal attack. So you're saying your business coach gives you quite strict feedback. How do you not take it personally? What could be your advice in that area?
I mean, in the end, I think you've just got to believe that, you may not like the delivery, but sometimes it's the truth.
It's to make you the best version of yourself, right? Get better outcomes.
That's absolutely right. And I think this is where a generation struggles a little bit. Okay, you're not performing well enough. And they spit their chips. Well, I'm working so hard, I'm effort. Well, is it your clinical ability? Is it time management? Is it, are you not billing appropriately for the work you've done? Are you doing extra work? All things that go into underperforming. But in the end, it's like that really being critiqued. What is it about it? And I think that isn't. And you've got to come in with the idea is, what can I learn from every single situation? Who was the best coach that you've had in your life, and why? What made them the best coach?
So for me, I'm going to name drop. Her name's Annette Hanley. She's an occupational therapist. She was one of my previous managers when I came to Australia. And I wanted to learn about home modifications, especially here in Australia. It's same, but different standards. And she is just an expert. She's so knowledgeable in home modifications as well as just occupational therapy. And her delivery of coaching was always done in a positive way. So it was a mixture of coaching, cheerleading, teaching, all of the above. And actually, I was so thankful to be able to have the opportunity to contract through the company. And that's where she kind of coached me. And it got to the point where they didn't need contracting work anymore. And I was heartbroken that I wouldn't have the opportunity to work with her. So I begged her and begged her to have a full-time position. I was able to work with her for another 9 months, and it was the best 9 months I ever had. I think I wouldn't be here today talking to you if it wasn't for any.
And how does having that good coach now lead into you being a mentor and coach in your now role as national clinical head?
I channel my Annette Hanley aura every single day. I reflect, is this how Annette would do it? And that's how I put my approach out, because I know how much I learned from her, how I felt, how I have been led into the person who I am today from her, and I just want to be the person for everybody else. Yeah. How about you?
I can think of a couple. I think if I go back to my aspiring elite sporting days, had a cricket coach, best batting coach, probably, one of the best batting coaches around, a guy called Neil DaCosta. And, he was just, if there was always conflict in there. His style was that very blunt, but he was also, trains, coached some of the best players in the world. But his ability to assess and critique, the weak areas and do it. And, I may not have been a person who took that on board, but I would always go away and think about it, but then I would apply it. And I think that ability to critique and actually understand where the weaknesses and errors, come, from, and then have the skill set to be able to teach and coach, in a positive way. So that is someone, always will and always will remember. I also had starting off a business coach called Andre Sawyer, part of a coaching group I was about of. And again, just that ability to understand where the problems I had as nowhere near the size of a company as I have today, but this ability to then identify the weaknesses, show the things so that I could implement strategies to do it. Even from budgets today, budget spreadsheets are still use those same things, but they came out of being critiqued, told this is where the weaknesses are. I remember doing the vision, mission, core values exercise the first time and thinking, oh, this is stupid, but I absolutely live and breathe it. Now it's like, you need to have this. Like it's a weakness of yours. So I remember that. I got a new business coach now, a lot more high profile, but he's straight up tells me, what is. And so I'm in this beginning of this journey, only a couple of months, but I'm seeing that now. So I certainly got a couple of very strong coaches that I remember. I think our challenge to the audience, I guess, we want to hopefully this message get out. But are you open to be coached now? Does understanding the difference between having a teacher, a manager, a cheerleader, they're all important roles. Like it's really, really important. But our challenge to you is, are you open to be coached now? And what area do you need a role, a coach in? Sorry, in what area do you need a coach as your role as a healthcare professional? Um, can you think of anything, Sarah? Like, obviously, want to challenge, the viewers out there, but is there, where are you at a point where you obviously reaching a pinnacle in the industry, but where are you still looking to be coached?
For me, my areas of being coached is to become a better coach. I think I still have a lot of learning to do to become a coach. I think I lean naturally more so on more leader, cheerleader style, that I think I personally need to be coached by a coach.
For me, Certain. I mean, I'm a little bit different because I'm going to be talking about business, but where I very much want to be an allied health professional podcast. So, that ability to, you know, really raise a person to their full potential is in how, I'm being coached on becoming a better communicator, and communicating at a level, um, from that point of view. There's some high level business acumen that aren't relevant for this podcast, but finding funding and things like that. But how do we, you know, but it's about getting the skill set, to improve performance and so, if we were to sum this episode 1 up, I think it's been a great discussion. I think hopefully, people are going to get a lot out of it. There's a desire for comfort and validation, and that is natural. Okay. But real leadership will emerge from the ability and willingness to confront challenges. And I hope that that people seek feedback, embrace the guidance of experienced mentors and coaches. So the questions remains really: are we open to be coached? Practitioners can pave their way for their own success and leadership in this dynamic and rewarding field. Like, healthcare offers so much to us. Okay, it's a secure platform. We make real changes in people's lives, but how are we going to put ourselves in a position where we'll be coached, which means that we're going to be critiqued, challenged, and really have that need to be vulnerable. And I think that's what my conclusion to this podcast today is. And hopefully there's some tips that you guys really get a lot out of.
Yeah, very nicely said. I couldn't have said it better. So thank you so much, Mark. This has been wonderful. I'm excited for episode 2.
Episode 1 done.
Amazing.
See ya.
Thank you.